Hello everyone, I'm Sahil from Code Help. Welcome back to another video. So in this video, let's discuss about member visibility, which can be achieved using different access modifiers provided in Typescript. So here we have a class student from our previous video. So this class has name and course property, and let me add one more property as, let's say, fees, and which would be of type number. Now, as we already discussed, I can access the properties using the dot notation and the property name. Like I can access the name of the class student by stud1 dot name, which will allow me to read as well as assign anything to this property. This is a default behavior in TypeScript which allows to read as well as change value of properties and function inside as well as outside of the class definition. But in TypeScript, we have different access modifiers which defines the scope and visibility of the member functions and member variables of the class so that they cannot be accessed from outside the class and lets you restrict its accessibility. Now these access modifiers comes into play when we want to encapsulate certain properties of the class and want them to be accessed from within the class only and don't want it to be accessed or changed via the object directly from outside the class. As we already saw, by default, the access type is public, which means that the member is available publicly and there is no access restriction whatsoever. So in our class student, we can write the member variable name as public space name as well. And leaving it without any modifier would also mean that it's public by default. But let's say if you want to restrict it to be used within the class only, and we don't want it to be used directly via the object outside the class, or maybe in any other class which is inheriting the class student. So we can do that by marking it as private. Let me do that. So let's put a private in front of name. Now you will notice that we are getting an error down here that property name is private and accessible only within the class. So student1 dot name is now not accessible. So now I'm not able to access the name property from outside the class using the dot notation with the help of the instance. So let me just comment this out, student1 dot name. But if we'll see on console, I'm still getting the output for the student details via my method call, and it is able to print the values of name and course successfully, though I am making the call from outside the class. Still I am getting the output. So this is because here I'm not accessing the private properties directly via the object of the class. Rather, I am just calling a public method which in turn calls a property name from within the function which is residing inside the class. So that's why I'm able to get the name and course property value via the function call. So that's how we can access a property which is labeled as private or make it available outside the class by using a member function which is public and could be accessed outside the class. So that was about accessing the value of a private property from outside the class. Similarly, you won't be able to set the value of a private property directly, but we will have to do it either via the constructor method that we have, or we might have to create a setter for the property that we want to access. So we have already used the constructor. So let's create a setter method for a property name, which is now labeled as private. Let's name it as set name and pass the name as argument along with the type. And inside the function, let's put this dot name is equal to the name. So this will assign whatever the value is passed as argument to the property value. So let's try changing the value of the name using the setter method. So if I do student1 dot set name, and I can pass any value within the brackets as an argument. So let's pass Sahil, and let's just log it to the console once again. So we can do that by console.log stud1, and let's just save the file and check the output on the console. And we can see here that the value has been updated to Sahil, and we are able to change the value using the setter function. Now moving on, there is another access modifier which is called as protected, which means you can use that member variable or function inside that class or any other class which is extending that class, but not directly via the instance of the class or any class which is extending it. So it is more or less like private, but you can access it in the class extending that class as well. We are going to discuss the protected mode in more detail in the inheritance lecture, as it will be more easier to explain with example. So let's make fees as protected for the time being, and also let's specify a type for the course member as well. Let me make it as public. So now we have private, public, and protected. Now, similar to the properties of the class, these access modifiers are applicable to the member functions as well. We can now restrict our functions to be accessed outside the class directly. So let's say we have this method get student details. So if I add a private in front of this method, and let me just save it. So you'll notice down here we are getting this error. So if I hover over it, it says that it cannot access a private member. So now this function can only be accessed from within the class and cannot be accessed from outside the class directly via the object of the class. So that's how we can use access modifiers to change the visibility of different member variables in function and define a definite scope for each of the properties that we have inside the class. So let's do a quick recap of the access modifiers. We have three access modifiers: public, private, and protected. In case of public, you can access the members from anywhere within the class as well as outside the class using the instance of that class. Secondly, we have private. So in case of private, you can access the members anywhere from within the class directly, but you cannot access it from outside the class using the instance of that class directly. And thirdly, we have protected. In case of protected, you can access the members anywhere from that class, also any class that extends the current class, so you can access it from those classes as well. But you cannot access it from the instance of the class directly. So that's all about access modifiers, and hope it has clarified all your doubt about access modifiers. If this video has helped you, please like it, leave a comment, share it with your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you and see you in the next lecture.